You're on the Six Screens Telenetwork, earning the reputation of giving all the right ingredients, uninhibited, and exposing the hard, cold facts about the Watchtower Society. And now, in Disney.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome into our program tonight, The Outside Story. Wow, my goodness, that's quite the name, isn't it? I mean, we know the inside story when you're inside the Watchtower, but what about people coming out of the Watchtower? What's the outside story? So we have got Fran and Joe. Well, they've only been out now for about 13, 14 months out of the Watchtower, and they have their program here on the Six Screens, and they got a man coming on tonight. I'm sure you all know Gary. He's on Facebook. He's on a number of platforms, and we're always glad to see him. So we're going to bring Fran and Joe on. We're going to bring Gary on, and we're going to get the wheels of progress moving. So here we go. We got everyone on with us. You guys are looking great tonight. I know it's late where you are, Gary. So what I'll do is I'll step in the background and let you guys take the program away.
Hello again, Gary.
Hi, how you guys doing?
Nice to have you here. I appreciate you taking time for this. I know it's late for you, but we're very thankful that you did.
It's either late or early, depending. It's 2:30 in the morning here, so
you got to jump on the next day. That's for sure.
Yeah. And I'm gonna have to talk kind of low because I don't want to wake anybody up. So
we can hear you fine.
Okay.
Okay.
Gary, go ahead and give a little bit about yourself, your background, and we'll listen.
Okay. Well, of course, I know you two from, as you know, from when I was in Sussex, and I served with your son, one of your sons, and that's where I met you.
And also our son-in-law, Jeremy.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, I knew Jeremy a lot longer actually.
That's right.
And he was in my book study, et cetera, et cetera. So I remember when we met you guys. It was you were in town for one of the weddings. So and it was really a surprise. I don't remember exactly how you contacted me, and I wasn't sure, like, do I know these people? And when I put it all together, I thought, wow, I can't believe it. The Guarinos.
That's
great.
You were being interviewed.
Right. It was probably the right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, that's what it was. Yeah. So I told my story then, but it's every time I tell it a little bit differently, probably,
Good.
But basically, I mean, when I got out, it was depending upon how you count it, it was anywhere from 2012 to 2016. Because I was sort of on the fringes. I had been an elder. I'd been at Bethel, and the doctrines always made sense to me, except the generation thing I thought was ridiculous. But really, everybody did. They just didn't want to say it. And I think today, even till today, I don't think there's anybody that's comfortable explaining it because it makes no sense, But so that didn't bother me. I thought they'll fix it, one of these days. I still thought we're living in the last days. It's still God's organization. But there were a lot of things that sounded really strange to me because when I was no longer an elder, you have a different purpose for being there at the meetings, and we never learn anything new at the meetings. I mean, I remember when I was brand new, it was so exciting because everything was new, and then you go through the ranks and you become an elder, and when you're an elder, you're listening to the meetings to make sure everything's okay and watching how others are responding, and now all of a sudden I'm on the outside looking in. And I'm hearing things differently, and I'm thinking this is weird because I was still in the Bethel congregation, the one that you visited. The Watchtower Farm Bethelites were there, and it was just like virtual worship of the governing body, and the elders were held in such high esteem, like as if nobody's saying they're perfect, but it was as if they are, And I started to realize that. A lot of that incorrect thinking is actually in the Watchtower magazine, and I never saw it that way before until I was in this situation where I was on the outside looking in. I started to realize that first of all, almost every magazine talks about something about how wonderful the elders are. They're just so held up in high esteem.
Loving shepherd.
Yeah. And when there was a specific article, like a study article about the elders' duties, I started to realize that they're presenting it as it not as it could be if this is what the elders do, or if this is what the elders did, but they were presenting it as this is the reality because the elders are all wonderful.
Yeah.
Like they don't, or if they said an elder made a mistake, they'd never be specific and say this happened or that happened.
Mm.
So I thought it's just a dishonest presentation of the whole thing, and it contributes to this whole concept of we obey the elders because they're just always wonderful, and anything they say is always the correct thing. And I knew that was wrong. I know I was an elder. I mean, I remember making mistakes that I apologized to people for. Some of the people that I was counseling, and I made a mistake, and it would be pointed out to me, and I'd feel terrible because as an elder, you're affecting people's lives, and I just didn't see anybody else ever doing that. It's more like we're perfect. So I started to see things very differently, and and the way people were treated, I never really agreed with a lot of the decisions that would be made about people and the degree of control in the congregation I was in. It wasn't like that where I came from, but I started to see the extreme degree of control of people's behaviors, their lifestyles, their decisions, and I never thought that was right, even when I was an elder. And now I'm seeing it even more clearly because I'm on the outside. Kind of not. I mean, I was still in the organization, still in good standing, so to speak. But so um, what basically happened was my first wife saw something developing in me that she was not comfortable with. She saw that I was kind of like doubting the elders and things like that. And I wouldn't make that obvious to the people in the congregation in general, but she could see it. And in hindsight, I could only see it by the time I was writing my first book. Actually, is when I could actually look back and say, "Wow, she was trying to get rid of me." Is what it was. She was trying to get a scriptural divorce, but there was not going to be a scriptural divorce because she couldn't prove anything. And she asked me outright, "Are you having an affair?" I said no. And so she basically engineered things so that if it would have to be a scriptural divorce because she thought that if I'm losing God's spirit, that the next thing you know, I'm going to be having fornication with somebody because that's just what we do, right?
Yeah.
That's what worldly people do, and I was losing God's spirit. So she basically engineered things so that that they basically all the the brotherhood, so-called brotherhood, turned against me. And anyway, I ended up without a home. I was living out of my car for a while. I was like, nobody was talking to me. Still not this fellowship. There was no committee ever formed. And so eventually, I moved. We got a divorce, and it wasn't scriptural as far as they were concerned, but it was to me because I knew the facts. And then I remarried, and about a couple of months after I remarried to a woman that wasn't one of Jehovah's Witnesses. Just a couple of months after I got remarried, I got a call from the elders. First time they spoke to me in years. They talked to me because they had put together a committee and they wanted to talk about my adulterous marriage. So I knew the handwriting was on the wall. I went through the process, uh, even including an appeals hearing. Not because I thought it was going to work, but just because I thought I don't want to lose contact with my kids, and I don't want to. I don't want to wake up every day thinking I wonder if I could have prevented it, and kicking myself in the butt every day because I didn't do anything. So I wanted to do everything I could, and I did, but it was really pointless. But I did it, and so I was put out of I was disfellowshipped back in I don't know when it was. It was early 2016. So that's when I was really out. And then the next thing to do was a couple of years later. I mean, I got really busy just getting my life back together. I started my own insurance agency. I got really busy right away putting things together, not worrying about this so-called brotherhood. And I didn't even care. I still thought the Jehovah's Witnesses have the truth, but it didn't matter to me because I wasn't, you know, I wasn't going to be involved anymore anyway. And in fact, the day that I was disfellowship was the last time I ever went into a Kingdom Hall, and I knew that was going to be the case. So it was about 2 years later that I woke up one morning and I said, I'm going to research because I'm kind of getting disconnected, and I don't want to be connected, but I'm getting disconnected from the beliefs as well. And I wanted to prove to myself that all of those things that we were taught are still true.
Wow.
So I started studying using really just the publications for the most part. I also read Crisis of Conscience, but I was checking out everything and checking it out in the Watchtower and all these different publications. And I started to, little by little, I said, I was disappointed at first. I mean, it's like I was like, yeah, this 1914 thing just doesn't add up. It just doesn't make any sense. And just one thing after the other. I realized that at some point, I realized that this doctrine's not true. This doctrine is correct. This one's inaccurate. Still thinking they have the truth, but it's just that they're off about these handful of things. And then I started to realize it's not a handful of things anymore. It's a lot of things, and it's the core beliefs. Like 1914 is a core belief that has to be true,
right?
If they have the truth, and especially because now the faithful and discreet slave and the governing body are the same thing. And supposedly they were appointed directly by Jesus himself in 1919.
Yeah.
Well, none of it adds up, for various reasons that are a little bit, lengthy to explain. And that's when I realized, no, it's not the truth. And I was content with that. It didn't I wasn't really super disappointed. Like, oh, what do I believe now? What's going to happen to me? Is the new system coming? It doesn't really matter to me. I still believe in a creator, and I think that essentially things are going to be good at some point in our history. And so that's basically it. That's how I ended up getting out. But like I was saying, I took the time to do things, uh, making friends with people. I had a radio station, and I knew a lot of people, so-called worldly people, but not that well. I just sort of knew them casually. And I just said, well, these are the people that I'm going to make my friends, and I turned them into good friends. Or, they turned themselves into good friends. I didn't make them that way, and then I started my own insurance agency, and I wrote a couple of books, and I just said I'm not going to gather moss here, um, not really knowing the psychology of it or anything. I just naturally did it.
Yeah.
So because basically when I was first homeless and all that, it was one problem after another. My bank account disappeared. All of my financial accounts disappeared. I woke up one day and they were closed. And guess who took the money?
Wow.
So no money, and I lost my job because of what she did. So I basically, it was really, really very, very rough for quite a while there. But again, I just took each day as it comes, and I just said, okay, that didn't work. What can I do today? And I just developed a little system of there's just two things that I do to tackle my problems, and I just do this naturally by instinct, I think. But I analyzed it, and I kind of wrote it down at one point. Is I just think, well, I can't worry about things that I can't control, things I can't affect. What's the point? Why should I sit there and say, oh yes, but what about this? What about that? Well, no, forget those things. Put them in the back. Forget them. Just worry about what are the things that I can do something about. And then when you look at all that list of things that I can actually affect, which one am I going to tackle first? And some days my only task was to get my cell phone back and get it charged so I can reconnect with the world after being incognito for several days. And other days it was visiting lawyers and getting money together. And so some days it was nothing, little tiny things. Other days it was very big things. But it was just one thing at a time.
Yeah.
So
You were establishing a real foundation.
yeah.
You really were.
I think we actually we called in on your radio station, if you remember.
Yeah.
Because we said, I think that's the way we got in touch with you.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned that you were on that radio. So we waited up because it was later for us. And we stayed up so we could call in.
Let's call Gary.
Yeah, now I think I remember that. And I was probably I must have been living in Montana at the time.
Yes, you were.
You were.
Yes.
Because well, when I moved to Montana, I said, I'm a fish out of water here. I don't know anybody. I just knew the person that I went to see. And I just started making friends through music because I'm a musician. So I go to clubs and I meet people, and they ended up asking me to come up on stage and play with them. And the next thing you know, I found out about our local radio station, and I just inquired about whether or not they could use DJs. And they said, "Oh yeah, 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 yeah." So I had a great idea for a show, and the next thing you know, I'm on the air again. So
Great.
that's how that's how I got in contact with you again. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Wow. You didn't let things slow you down. That was tremendous.
No. No, I was just talking to somebody today about how I actually was kind of resting a lot today, and I was just talking about how I was really tired because of the things I was trying to tackle before, and it was just kind of wearing me out. And I said, I'm going to take a little bit of a nap. And then I get up from this nap and I'm like, I got to do something. I got to do something. I can't just sit around and wait for things to happen. So, yeah.
All right.
So
Perfect.
can you, how did you get to the UK?
Well, I met somebody that, that, I wanted to get to know better. And so I moved, and I tell you, it was rough because I just assumed that it's an English culture. I mean, we're from an English culture in the United States, not a British culture, but and I just saw that I'll find a place to live, and that was hard. It was really hard. I was hemorrhaging money like you can't believe because I was staying in a hotel and I couldn't find a place to live because I didn't have a British telephone. And with that, you have to have this and that in order to get that and this. And if you don't have that and this, how do you get this and that?
Wow.
So I finally found a place to live, and then that was temporary. And then I just moved into a new flat about a month ago. So got a car, and it was kind of rough, but I'm glad I made the move. And again, I'm just making friends like crazy. I mean, I maybe 3 or 4 nights a week I'm out in the clubs or in the pubs, I should say, playing music.
How do you find the
Just
music there different than here, Gary, or the musicians or the whole field? How's it
well,
different?
what I think is interesting is that when I was a kid, I mean, I listened to all kinds of music, classical, everything that came through. But what I really, really fell in love with was basically British music, the Beatles, the British Invasion,
Oh,
and
yeah.
Eric Clapton especially. And when I discovered Eric Clapton when I was around 9 or 10, I discovered the blues, and I didn't even know what the blues was. I never heard of it before. All of those people got their start on American. Well, we say American. I hate to use that phrase because it's so chauvinistic, it seems to me. But from the United States, they listened to rock and roll and blues records from the United States, and then they played what they played, and that came to us. So I learned about U.S. music through the Brits.
Wow.
So now here I am in Britain, and I go to these pubs, and I would say about 90 or 95% of the music they play is American music. It's I mean, it's mostly the better known songs from the artists that they're playing, and it's almost all American music. It's amazing, and I'm there. I'm saying, let's play this, let's play that, and they didn't even know what I'm talking. There's a Rolling Stones song I like to play, and I don't know, probably 90% of the people don't even know the song.
That's
And I'm like, it's not one of their big hits, but I mean, how can you not know this song? I say it's from the Rolling Stones. They're from a country called England, and they're kind of popular, for sort of well known. Maybe you heard of them. So it's kind of strange.
You bring a lot to them. Man. That's great.
Yeah. So the music isn't a lot different, really. It's like I said, it's mostly U.S. kind of music. I think when they start playing, sometimes you'll see bands that are kind of in a punk mode, and they'll play a lot of like the Jam and stuff like that we heard in the United States, but they're playing mainly British music at that point. So yeah. But I listen to a lot of classical music. Like on the radio, I'm listening to classical all the time, and they play a lot of British composers. So it's interesting.
Fascinating.
So is that your main source of income?
No, I'm actually on Social Security.
Oh,
But I'm also a life coach, and
right.
so whether it comes in from America or from England or from anywhere, I've talked to people in Cambodia and France and parts of Africa. So that's so between those two things, that's what keeps me going.
You had mentioned that on JT and Lady C that you were a life coach back then. Did you?
Yeah.
Did you have to go to school for that, or?
Yeah, I did to get certified, but what I found out a couple of years ago, I guess it was, is that it all of a sudden dawned on me that I have really been a life coach most of my life. I just didn't know it, because I have a natural tendency to listen to people. I mean, I know how to talk a lot, I'm told, but I listen to people. Even when I was an elder, I was like that. I could, as an elder, I could be a jackass just like anybody. I could be by the book and you got to do this, you got to do that. But more often than not, I was like, this doesn't make sense. We're doing this wrong. And I would just listen to people and I would just say, tell me what's most important to you.
Yeah.
Like I remember when a couple asked us to come over because they were having marital problems, and I wasn't actually the one to say this, but a brother a brother, I hate to use that expression, but the guy I was with said, he's a really intuitive guy, and he just said to them, what do you want to have happen? And that is such a good question. It's because it has nothing to do with, well, this is what David did in the Bible, and it's what do you want to have happen? What's in your heart? How do you see yourself a year from now?
Yeah.
Where do you want this marriage to go? And
Right.
I learned that in the JW context to use that kind of reasoning,
Yeah.
and I just naturally do that anyway. So the people in my insurance agency would none of whom were witnesses would once in a while ask me for advice on something that had nothing to do with work, and I would listen for like half an hour if it took that long, and I would just once in a while I would just say, oh, so maybe let me make sure I understand this, and I would repeat it to them, and they'd say, "Yeah, that's right." And I say, "Okay," or I'd ask a question. I say, "Well, wait a minute, were you talking to who told you that, Joe or Mary?" So I would confirm things, and then they would kind of put it all together and
Yeah.
discover the solution that they're looking for without me really telling them. And then I'd say, "Well, okay, so that's what you're going to do. So you're going to call so and so tomorrow, and that sounds like a really great idea." Then they'd come back to me the next day and say, "Wow, Gary, you helped me so much. I can't believe how you figured that out." And I'd say, "Well, thanks, but you really figured it out." See, one of the things I think happens when you're talking to somebody that's not judgmental and is not,
Mm-hmm.
automatically offering advice like right out of the gate, is that you realize that you have the power to make decisions and to make things happen that just get all ground up in a big bowl of soup with all the conflicting things and all the problems that come in on us and all the multiple things that are going to prevent this plan from happening. I call it head trash. It becomes head trash. And when you talk to somebody that's not judgmental, not offering advice just off the top of his head or condemning you, um, you your own brain power starts to come through, and that's what people learn. And I say, well, thank you for the compliment and for thanking me, but I just want you to know that you're a lot smarter than you think you are. You solve the problem. There's a scripture that I don't quote scriptures anymore, but and I can't remember how I do this, but I take it basically is talking about prayer, and it's you know what, maybe I'll look it up here really quick because I just want to read. This is the way I read it to people. I don't read it as a scripture. Um, I'll be with you any second now. I've got it here on my phone somewhere. Here we go. Okay, so this will sound familiar to you, but I'm going to change it. Do not be anxious over anything, but in everything, along with thanksgiving, let the peace that surpasses all understanding guard your hearts and your mental powers. And you've probably heard that before.
Mhm.
Oh, sure.
I took God and Jesus and Holy Spirit out of that. Not because I'm a pagan or anything, but just because it means the same thing.
Right.
I
Right.
It just says don't be just what it talks about your mental powers. You have mental power.
Right.
Right.
When you talk to anybody, you can talk to God or you can talk to me or you can talk to the universe or whatever, and it's all kind of the same thing. When you talk to the right person, you're expressing something in a way that you would not express it to somebody that is judgmental, let's say, or going over and over and over in your head, along with all the problems that are multiplying multiplying themselves and making it impossible.
Yeah.
And and all of a sudden, wham, you've got an answer, and that's why I know I was never really big on praying because it became very perfunctory. It was almost like another meeting part,
Right.
I kind of dreaded it. I did it all the time. You're always thinking, how can I say this differently? It just, so I never really prayed a lot. And I don't know if that's good or bad, but once in a while, somebody that would say to me that they were praying about something and they got the answer, like God told them the answer. So, well, what really happened was you were just clearing your head and expressing it, thinking about how am I going to say this to the person I'm praying to, and you're kind of filtering out the most important part of it and percolating that up to the top. So anyway, to get back to where we started, I uh, I realized that I'm essentially a life coach anyway, because it's more of a personality type than it is an actual vocation. It's a personality type. I didn't have to make any changes when I went through the training and all the studying and all the certification. It just was like, oh, okay, this is what I do already. I mean, I had to apply some of the things that they taught more specifically, but yeah, I just realized that this is what I do anyway. So, and it's a joy. I mean, um if you're gonna make money at something, you might as well do something that you like to do, and it's gonna help people. So
Tremendous.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you center on the person.
Hmm.
And sometimes a person who's, in conflict or confused, they can't even hear themselves. You,
Hmm.
you help them hear themselves.
Yeah.
If anyone is interested in getting in touch with you for a life coach, how would they go about that?
Well, I noticed it says right at the bottom of the screen under my name, it says Open Path Life Coach.
Oh, okay, that's it.
So if you just jam those words together, take out the spaces, and add a .com at the end, so it's openpathlifecoach.com. That's my website, and it's got my contact information on it. And I will say that when I'm dealing with I call them post JWs, not ex JWs, because it's like we're done with it, we're past it. So I don't like to think of them an ex anything. But when I'm dealing with post JWs, I have a whole structure for programs for if you want to talk to me for a month or for 3 months or 6 months, and this is what it costs. Don't even look at that, because number one, I realized that as JWs, we were programmed for failure. We were programmed for financial and failure in terms of what we could do in terms of making a success in business or in a job or whatever. We were programmed for failure, and so a lot of us who have gotten out are just have no idea how to do it. How to make friends, how to um, get that advancement at work, and it's you're almost afraid of making money because you're programmed for failure, and you just almost don't want success. It's if we do it really on a business level, we work it out to whatever is affordable. So
That's nice.
Yeah, that's a great point, Carol. We'll expand a little bit on that too when you're through. It's a great point. Great point.
Yeah. So, and then what else do I do? I mean, I've also been writing a lot of prose, which I never did before. I mean, I knew how to write, but I wrote a book about I don't know, about 6 years ago now, that one of my friends had recommended I write, because as I started making friends after I got booted out, um, I would naturally, at that point I was still telling my story a lot. Now I only do it like at times like this when I'm in front of an audience, but I don't really think about the people I used to know and all that much. But this person said you should really write this stuff down. You should write a book, because this is crazy. Your life is really very interesting. And I said, yeah, right. I don't know, whatever. But then one day I kind of thought about a way that I would do it if I did it, and I started writing something. And the next thing you know, I had a chapter, and then I had a fourth chapter, and an eighth chapter, and so it's so it's in a book. So I'm actually, I just finished another one that I'm I think I sent you a copy, didn't I?
Yeah.
That it's basically finished, but I'm just kind of putting the little finishing touches on it. So it's one of the things I do.
We're going to read it. I haven't looked at it
Yes,
yet,
we
but I'm
are.
going to.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's different. And again, I didn't think I would. It was actually one of the same people that said I should write about my life story said several years ago, you should really write about your experiences at that place you call Bethel, that Watchtower place in Brooklyn. And I said, well, yeah, okay, that's a nice idea. But first of all, I don't remember a lot of those people. I don't really want to remember them. And I had fun. It was a good experience in a way. In a lot of ways, it's a bad experience. But I don't want to. All the stuff you have to do the research. I just don't want to do that. And I couldn't think of like how am I going to even approach it? Like why? Who would be interested in these stories? They're kind of silly. Until not that long ago, maybe a year or two ago, I got the idea. I don't remember how it came to me, but I just got the idea of I knew all of the governing body members at that point. Some of them very very well, but I knew every one of them better than most of the family would because we sat at what they call a Gilead table, which meant that I ate lunch and breakfast with a governing body member every day. For
That's more than I
for
can
all,
say.
yeah, I mean, it was just some of it was casual and everything, and then since then I got to know Garrett Lurch. He came to my house for the weekend one time, and I started to think, boy, I really do know a lot of these guys.
Yeah,
You
you
know,
do.
and
yeah.
and I knew Sam Hurd. He was our first circuit overseer back in the '70s, and I remember him very well. So I thought, yeah, I guess I could write just about the governing body, so that's what I did. And again, I put it down and picked it up a lot of times because I kept thinking, what's the point, really? Like who's really going to want to dwell? I'm trying to encourage people not to dwell on the goings on of the organization
Yeah.
because you get stuck. So why am I going back and back and back and and why would I want people to read about all this stuff? And then I remember talking to Barbara Anderson about it, and she said no, and she read it, and she said you got to tell this story, you got to put that out there because it has things in there about that I think are probably going to be new to most people, maybe all people, just about conflicts within the governing body that were not perceptible because they try to put up a united front like any elder body would, and but I knew there's things that you can sense and things that you can put together in retrospect and realize I know just from the letters that we would get as elders, we get letters from the service committee, or not the service committee but the service department, that said one thing, and it seemed like it contradicted things that we had learned in elder school, which comes from the teaching committee and the writing committee. Like the elders book and all that stuff comes from the right. And I thought, why is it so different? Directions about handling cases of pedophilia, for example, were very different depending upon which department was sending you the information. And I started to look at that, and all of what I remember about a couple of the governing body members, one of which was in the service department and the other was in the writing department. And I talked with Barbara Anderson about it because she knows these guys really better than me, really, because she was worked on the Awake magazine, and I started to realize, like, wow, this was a battle that was going on for years,
Yeah.
and the guy that won was the one that outlived the other one, and he's the one that has a homosexual past that might even have been pedophilic. I don't really know, because there were certain young men that had reported him. And I don't know how old they were, but if they were under 18, it's pedophilia. So it makes you wonder, like why with the Australia Royal Commission, why they couldn't get their hands on the database that the Watchtower somehow couldn't find anymore. And it makes you wonder, like, what's the Watchtower really trying to hide? Could it be these couple of guys, and there were other things, even the so-called prohibition against higher education, and the idea of going to a psychiatrist, taking medications prescribed by a psychiatrist. There are a lot of people that are under the impression that those are absolutely banned, that Jehovah's Witnesses can't do those things, and was not my experience. But when I look back on it now, I thought, wow, these same guys that had different ideas about how to treat pedophilia and elders that are accused of it, one of them had a college education and the other didn't. And the one that didn't, who outlived the other one, also had a lot to do with appointing the guys that are on the governing body now. And now they have a much more rigid stance about higher education that they didn't have before. But I specifically remember I used to keep a binder, actually, a big binder like that thick, of all the articles in the Awake about psychiatry and you know, therapy and you know that branch of science and that method of treating people. And they were actually positive articles. And I'll never forget how there was one year, I guess it was in the 90s, when I just realized that every time I got a new magazine, especially the Awake magazine, I was always hoping it would have another article about psychiatry or therapy or mental health. And it didn't happen. Like magazine after magazine, year after year after year. And I finally realized that they're not going to do that anymore because they changed their stance on it. And it's because the bad guy won. So it's just interesting to understand that stuff, because you know, the old expression, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. So if you think that, yeah, the Jehovah's Witnesses, they always banned college and they always did it, well, that's very, very inaccurate. Not that everybody needs to know all the gory details, but it's very inaccurate. And if you understand it better, you can deal with it better and not have all this anger and resentment and, you know, be in this victim stance where you're always blaming somebody. So that's kind of why I had to finish the book. I just thought, wow. And Barbara said, yeah, you really need to put that out there. So hopefully it'll be out in a month or so.
All these things you're describing, Gary, they sound like they could have been obstacles to your faith. How did you react to them with that in mind?
Well, I didn't perceive it as I kind of perceived it the same as most of us would. I just thought that well, yeah, right now in elder school we got information about dealing with repressed memories, for example, that might have to do with child abuse or what have you. And I thought it was good information. And then when the information kind of stopped, I just thought, well, I don't know. I mean, it's the faithful screen. It's, you know, the organization is that chariot that's changing direction. And I just bought the whole story, you know. And as much as there were things that I didn't put up with, I just said, no, we're not doing it this way. I don't care what anybody says, because that's wrong. And I'll give you an example in a minute. As much as I did that, I could also be that kind of person that would make excuses for the organization because it's God's organization. So I would say, well, yeah, you know, this is the best thing we have. It's what they call what do they call it? I don't know if this is a clinical term or not, but they call it malignant optimism, where the malignant optimist, it's usually used in connection with a narcissistic relationship, because the narcissist wants you to think that he's wonderful, you know, and you stay within that relationship because you're always thinking that I really love this person and it'll get better. It's just that it's not going to be today. And it's the same thing with the organization. I was a malignant optimist. I thought, yeah, it's as good as it can be today. It'll get better. And there's really no reason to think it's going to get better. So when I finally realized that, no, this is actually the way the magazines are written. There's a reason why things are so dysfunctional. That's when it became difficult. I was actually really miserable for those, you know, from like, I don't know, maybe late 90s to or the aughts, maybe something like that, until I finally left. I was really miserable at the meetings and everything, and I really went mainly for my kids to set the right example, I thought.
So you were going through a real conflict then.
Yeah, that was the conflict. It was that not that the doctrines were wrong, because I didn't realize that yet, but just that things are wrong, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I told you I'd give an example of like when I was an elder, just one of the many things that I knew were wrong was when we got a letter once from the I guess it was from the service department. I don't know, but it was talking about judicial matters and how we are not to when you have an actual judicial committee, that person is already assumed that they have done what they're accused of. It's just a matter of judging are they repentant or not, you know. The committee's work needs to be completed by the end of that hearing. No multiple hearings. No, we're going to work with this person. No, we're going to see you again in a week or something like that. You have to make a decision by the end of that meeting, yay or nay, disfellowshipped or not. And I thought, well, I don't know, maybe in some cases that would work, but we had a case of an alcoholic. So I guess that means that he has to promise us he's never going to take another drink again, and we have to somehow prove that he's going to do that. What if he has a seizure tomorrow because he went cold turkey? And what if that seizure kills him? I mean, it's just like I couldn't believe this stupidity. So it's like these guys in Brooklyn, they just don't know that. They don't have any idea that there are things that you can't just quit like today. I don't know. So I don't know. What I did in that case was I couldn't convince the other guys on the committee that that we should give us a little time. So what I did was,
go ahead.
what I basically did was I said, I would like to have a study with this guy because he had just been reinstated anyway. He had been out. This is the first I ever met him actually. Was around the time that I was an elder on his committee because he had just been reinstated and he had been out when I first moved to the congregation for something totally unrelated. So I thought, well, I don't even know what he knows anymore. I mean, he was raised in a witness family. Half the time they don't actually study with the kid. They just expect him to get it all through osmosis, you know. So I thought, yeah, he could probably use a Bible study. And I really did it because I wanted to buy time. And I talked the guys into that. I said, we're going to let him off the hook this time. And we're going to see what happens with the Bible study. And sure enough, he never had a drink. It had nothing to do with me. It had to do with him because he had committed himself. And I remember he had a calendar on his wall where he would put a red X through every day that he never drank. And it went for months and months and months. And I would just tell him, I am so proud of you. I mean, it takes so much courage and willpower to do that.
So, Gary, here you were. Here you were taking such a humanitarian approach in a very authoritarian situation.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. And so that's an example of a thing where I just couldn't see towing the line, like going by the book. It's just stupid, just absolutely stupid to do that.
Maybe if you didn't have that study with him, who knows how it could have turned out.
Yeah, you don't know. Right. Because he depended upon a lot on his family. His father was an elder on the body with me, and you're going to cut him off from that now, like what? I don't know.
Loving shepherd.
Yeah,
you were a loving shepherd. No, it's beautiful. Well, Gary, I truly appreciate what you're relating, and I'm sure others do too. If you want to either a little more to relate, if you'd like, but then would you mind if I opened it up to some questions? If anybody,
yeah, sure.
Okay. Yeah. So if anybody is there and would like to mention anything to Gary or anyone.
I can't see the questions that you probably see. So.
They come right in.
They'll just call right in. Yeah.
And, I have a question.
Okay.
Hello?
Yeah.
Hi. You sound like you're so together after being a witness and you've experienced so much. What would you say from your experience that you could say is the main thing that really helped you to leave Jehovah's Witnesses, and now that you've left, that keeps you going strong?
There are a lot of things, but I believe very strongly that we have to truly leave the organization in our mind and in our heart, not just going to the Kingdom Hall. That's and not turning in field service report. That's just the activity. If the organization doesn't matter to us anymore, we couldn't care less because we just heard that Tony Morris was removed from the governing body, and we don't even care. That's when we're really, and I'm not saying that everybody should have the same attitude about that, but when it just doesn't matter to us anymore, what they're doing, we're not even interested in hearing news about it. That's when we've really moved past it. So I think at some point I just realized that I just really don't care about what they're doing, except the fact that my kids are in, and so I can't see them all the time, which bothers me greatly. But and there are ways to do that, and it's something I talk about. I've done blogs on it and videos, and I talk to some of my clients about it. But there are ways of doing that in our mind, of kind of putting the organization in a trash can in our mind, because we might understandably be angry because we're in a grieving process, basically. Um, and when you've lost somebody, they never come back. If somebody in your family died, they're never going to come back. So you're always dealing with that loss, but you just kind of learn ways of dealing with it. And it's the same thing with losing the so-called brotherhood, all our friends, losing a set of beliefs. We go through a grieving process. And part of that process is anger, part of it is sadness, part of it is disbelief, part of it is forgiveness, acceptance, reconstructing. There's all kinds of different aspects of it. And all of them are okay. It's nothing wrong with being angry at times. But if we're angry like 3 years from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that's not really healthy anger anymore. So if we can kind of redirect our anger, where, like, if we just don't care about the organization anymore, so rather than, like for example, if the way I actually usually apply this is if people that are grieving because they've lost the affection and association of family members, and they're angry as hell at their mother or their father or their own kids. They're just angry and resentful, and they can't stand it. Just take that anger and take it off of them, because they're doing the best they can. They don't understand how what they're doing is hurting you. They really think that it's loving. They're doing the right thing. Why do they think that? It's because the organization teaches them that. So take all that anger and resentment and put it where it belongs, on the organization. And then when you finally realize that the organization doesn't mean anything and you throw it in the trash can, there goes your anger and your resentment. It's gone. So that's kind of what I do. I kind of went through that process. Hope that answers your question. I probably went on it for too long.
No, that was perfect.
It does, because there's a lot of anger that seems to be left over, and you try to get rid of it. Sometimes you do, sometimes you don't. But I think the idea of just throwing your anger in the trash basket and just walking away and saying, I'm done.
Yeah. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with being angry at times. It's a natural part of grieving. There's nothing wrong with being sad. And if we're sad tomorrow and think, well, the anger's gone, and then we get angry again the next week, and then sad again the week after that, there's nothing wrong with us. That is a normal way to grieve. It's just that at some point we need to do something more constructive with those feelings. So I never recommend stuffing feelings, like just pretending you're not angry and just stuffing it. Controlling it, yeah. Like, you don't want to get so angry that you smash your car into somebody or something, whatever. But there's nothing wrong with feeling those things. But like I said, at some point it's not healthy anymore.
Well, thank you very much.
Sure.
Very
Thanks for
helpful.
calling.
It's very helpful, Gary.
Well, Gary, you mentioned like you have 3 children, right?
Hmm.
And we have 4. And one thing that we've done, it kind of helps us. We text them almost every day as a group
Mhm.
text,
Yeah.
whether they read it or not.
Yeah.
We just it helps us just to kind
Okay.
of we're communicating with them.
Hmm.
Yeah, we continue.
Yeah, and I've heard people that do that. I mean, you're hoping that they'll actually respond to it because you're physically doing it. I've heard other people that they just write something and then they just throw it away, but they just writing it helped them.
Right.
Well,
I've done it. I've done it in the past where I wrote it and sent the letter too. And I've tried communicating with my kids as well, not as often as you.
Right.
I tried, like, with my daughter who had a baby. Geez, I guess I don't remember if it's a year ago now or 2 years ago. Isn't that terrible? I can't even remember. But because I've never seen the child.
Yeah.
And I sent them a bag of, or a box of, big, like, can you see my gestures? A big box of clothing that went from anywhere from like
Wow.
newborn to 12 months.
Wow.
And she sent me a note saying thank you.
Oh.
And then sometime after that, I sent her a note saying that I would like to bring my parents to see her in North Carolina. They live in Delaware, and they just don't travel anywhere anymore. They just can't. They're 89 years old. They just can't travel, even for
Wow.
a short trip like that. So I said they'd like to see you, and I would like to bring them. And I said I'll stay in a hotel, and don't
Mhm.
worry about it. And she just sent me back a really callous note, just a completely inhuman rather, not inhumane, inhuman thing, saying like that. No, only necessary business. Like seeing my granddaughter is not necessary.
Oh,
So what is necessary? The only thing I can think that's necessary is if somebody dies and you're settling
right.
a will. Other than
Yeah,
that, it's like
it's
so
hard.
the person I was living with at the time, who's a licensed therapist, pointed out to me that if you look at her letter and compare it to the one that you sent to her, yours was full of human emotions. I
Mhm.
love you. I
Yeah.
hope you're doing well. Hers has nothing like that in it. All it
Yeah.
is just don't call me again.
Yeah.
So yeah. So anyway, good luck with that, though, friend
Well,
Joe. I
we
mean,
just do it
Well,
for our.
on both sides, I just expressed, and I have to acknowledge that there's some really deep lessons that both of us have to learn,
Mhm.
them
mhm,
as well as us, and kind
mhm,
of leave it. I just basically leave it out there.
Mhm.
Um, do I expect them to read it? Maybe yes, and maybe not.
They may not.
But if
mhm,
if I don't express it, then I feel like I'm repressing
Mhm.
myself.
Yeah.
I
mhm.
need to express it. I need
Yeah, yeah. If it's important to you, there's always going to be somebody that says, "Oh, that's a big mistake, Fran and Joe. You shouldn't do that." Or there's going to be somebody that tells me that the way I'm doing it is a big mistake.
Oh,
But it's
Mhm.
like you can't. Again, it's a grieving thing. You're
that's
Right.
trying to,
It's an
everybody
and you
offense.
grieves
can't.
differently.
Yep.
Yeah, you wouldn't go up to somebody at their funeral and say, "Stop crying about your
No.
mother." It's
No,
So
No.
yeah.
I respect it. I think it's good that you do that. I mean, maybe I should do it more often myself. I don't know.
I mean, you spoke about the healing, and we have a physical healing process. Injury on our hand, it's immediately going into a healing process. May not be visible at the time, but immediately it's going into a healing process.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we understand what's happening, we can fit into actually helping it, or at least
Mm-hmm.
not getting in the way of it.
Mhm.
And because so many of us haven't gone through, this kind of abuse, trauma, grief, or whatever, we have no idea what the process is. We just
Mm-hmm.
don't know. So it's helpful if we come to understand and do a little research on what does it mean for me to heal.
Mhm.
What
Mm-hmm.
what steps could I be going through?
Mhm.
Should I be going through? How can
Mm-hmm.
I see that next step and help it and not get in the way of it.
Yeah.
And it's sharing it with each other.
Yeah. The thing
Mm-hmm.
that's really, really, really helped us is reaching out to others.
Mm-hmm.
We have made so many connections.
Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
We've connected people because people are reaching out to us because of being on Wendy's
we gave
program.
them our phone number.
We gave them our phone
Mm-hmm.
number. We gave them our email. Just to, oh my goodness, what's happened?
Hmm.
It's just kind of like for the longest time we said, we wish we could find those immediately around us that have left.
We're looking for
Mm-hmm.
We're
it.
looking for them.
We're,
And we couldn't find them.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, because they found us on Wendy Renee,
it started.
they got back to us. So we found 1, 2, 3, 4. Just today, there was one, and we were wondering about her. We said, "Where is so and so? Where's?" And she writes to Wendy, and she
Mm-hmm.
writes to us, and she said, "I was in the Herkimer congregation with you, and my long lost family." She said, and she's our children's age.
Mm-hmm.
So we've gained so many children. I mean, obviously they're not our own
No,
children, but we have
good
adopted
friends.
so many
Good
children.
good friends.
Um,
Very
and,
good
and
friends.
and then we connect them with other friends. And this one, I'll call her. What do you call them? Post. What did she? Not ex, but post.
Post.
Post. A post sister, who we hadn't talked to in 4 years. We just got together with her yesterday. She came here, and she's finding out all these people. And she said when she first came out 4 years ago, she felt so alone because she couldn't talk to anyone, and she felt so guilty for that. And now she's making all these connections, and she's helping us to make connections, and she's really feeling good about it. So that we really heal doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I know the other thing that you guys are involved with is, I guess you're still doing, is like the, helping the um, potential suicide candidates, which is a great thing. I mean, that's a huge thing, but you've got to have connections to do that stuff.
Oh yeah, we
So,
can't. We're
yeah.
not professional,
No.
but we
Right.
talk to them, and we can, refer them. Even though Joe's got a counseling background, he did go to college for that, so he's really good in talking with people and
Mhm.
behavior modification.
Yeah,
And
but the most important thing is just knowing what your resources are.
yeah,
In other
Mhm.
words, look, why don't you go in this direction? Why don't you go in that direction? See so and so about this. Most cases, people just don't even know the resources that are out there for them.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. And,
Yeah.
and when we first came out a year ago, we went to a psychiatrist, and he was very, very knowledgeable of the witnesses
Yeah.
of the suicide. So we went back to him a second time. He wanted to know how we were doing, and we told him, and he goes, "Man, you guys are doing really good. You're like, this is unbelievable. I don't usually get patients like this." So he said he might even come on the program
Yeah.
sometime.
And he's a resource that,
Yes.
we want to help be a part of.
Yeah.
Because we can't do it alone.
No,
That
we need
can't-
everyone.
If we try to do it alone, we're going to feel overwhelmed. It's going to look bleak. It's going to be negative. It's going to be dark. But the more we open it up, it just becomes lighter and lighter. It really-
Mhm.
I bet there's more people on the phone that are trying to call in. Is there anyone
Okay.
out there?
Hit *6 if you
Hi.
like. Come on in. Yes, go ahead.
Hey, hi, friends. This is Debbie. How are y'all?
Debbie's.
Listen, Gary, I really have enjoyed listening to you. I think you made a lot of good points and really are helpful to listen to. I think what you do as a life coach is really awesome.
Oh, thanks.
Some people in the chat though that have not been as receptive, especially when person in particular. I mean, he's apparently being triggered. I'm not sure, but he's just saying some very, very mean things on here. That I just wanted to go on here and tell you that it's really important the kind of work you're doing, and we need this kind of work, and to have a post Jehovah's Witness. I really like that too. The post Jehovah's Witnessing. I like that better than saying ex Jehovah's Witness too. But we need people like you.
Yeah.
And Fran and Joe are great at it too. They help a lot.
Can I just jump in and interject, Gary? I know you'd call them post Jehovah's Witnesses. I call them Watchtower graduates.
There you go.
We've graduated their school. We're out. We're gone.
Yeah. Well,
Good to hear.
that's actually consistent with what I was thinking before, is that I don't say I'm ex anything. I'm not an ex little leaguer. I haven't played in little league since I was a kid. I'm not an ex little leaguer. That's what I used to do.
Yeah.
And I'm not an ex Tresper Clark high school attendee. I graduated from Clark. I'm not an ex, So yeah, it's the same thing. So I've graduated from the Watchtower School, I guess. Yeah.
We're
But
great.
and that gets into another thing is when people refer to themselves as disfellowshipped, like 20 years later, like, yeah, I'm disfellowshipped.
Oh yeah.
what are you disfellowshipped from? Like, what does that mean? I mean, that designation only means something to people in that organization. It means
That's right.
nothing. When you go to Burger King to drive up to order a burger, they don't say, "Hey, are you still disfellowshipped?" Or you don't say, "Can I order a burger? I'm disfellowshipped, but can I order a burger?" It means nothing to anybody unless you're a Jehovah's Witness.
Exactly.
So
You know,
why do we define ourselves according to as a designation that only means something in that organization?
That's right.
so
So
Gary, you think it's very important to change our point of view when we're out?
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
It is, yeah.
And our
Yeah, because
vocabulary.
we don't want to be defined in any way by that organization. That's what I used to do. It's part of who I am today, yes.
Right.
You know, they might even have taught me things. I mean, and I'm grateful for some of the people I knew and
Yeah.
some of the things I learned.
Yeah.
But
It's
it
uncomfortable,
doesn't
but we're not
you're right,
used, but we're not used to it.
right.
But we're not used to it. What do we do to get used to it?
Watchtower graduates is a good way to put it. And
Yeah, yeah.
even graduated from the Kingdom Ministry School.
Yeah. You know, I learned that that post Jehovah's Witness thing. I got that from actually Wendy, oh, I forget her last name, Wilcock Jensen, I think her name is, but she's very prominent in on one of the XJW Facebook groups as a Mormon. She was a Mormon, and she's spoken. She goes to these empowered conferences a lot. And when I met her, she said, "Yeah, I'm a post Mormon. I'm not an ex Mormon. I'm an post." So I thought, "Yeah, I'm all right. I'm going to say that for now on." It's a subtle thing, but it is the way we think. Like I'm not defined by that organization. It's what I did. There's no point trying to pretend I wasn't a Jehovah's Witness. You know, I'm not going to try to forget it, but it doesn't define me anymore.
So each one of us then can have to go that next little step and come up with that mind trigger, you know, to change, to make that change for themselves. Because maybe they'll want to use some other term, but so anything that helps them to take that next step
Yep.
out. Yeah.
Good point.
Yeah. Thanks for calling in, by the way. Yeah.
We your book. We're going to look forward to your book, Gary.
Yep.
Yeah. Thanks.
What you have is the experiences you have is valuable. I can't say I've done any one of those things that you've done.
Yeah.
So, and others.
Well, and when you read it, what I'm always concerned about is that some of the stories are sort of like my experiences with Fred Franz are kind of limited, really. I mean, I had lunch and dinner with lunch and breakfast with him every day, the same as everybody else, and I saw him on the way to work all the time. I was in his office, you know, but I couldn't really think of a lot of things to say about him. But I just wanted to include him in it. But then there are some that like Carrie Barber. He was at my house for the weekend when he did my dedication program our dedication program for the New Kingdom Hall, and I talked to him quite a bit about Ray Franz, and it was very eye opening. He didn't say anything so specific that was like, you know, it's just when I put it together and I put it together with events because I was in Bethel just after Ray Franz had left and he was not disassociated yet. And we would get certain reports and announcements about him. And when I compared the timing of those things with what I read in Franz's book about the timing of the witch hunt with not just him, but the other so-called apostates, and then I put it together with things that I had discussed with Carrie Barber, that, okay, now I understand this a little bit better, you know? So I share things like that. And you know, then there are people like Dan Sidlick, who's everybody loved Dan Sidlick. I mean, all the young guys, I still am in contact with some people that are out now, but were at Bethel too, including Barbara Anderson. And they don't have anything bad to say about Dan Sidlick. He was just he loved the young guys and they loved him back. So my experiences with him were mostly positive, but there was one thing that he did that was very, very discouraging to me. It broke my heart actually. So I report on it, you know. Doesn't make him a bad man, but it just showed that I don't know, he was insensitive at times, I guess. Yeah, I don't know.
It's a realistic view. You know, what you show and what you relate, I mean, in my mind, you're relating your course of faith that you've taken. And that's valuable to anyone else reading and listening to that, because every one of us wonders, well, how do I take my steps of faith? What do I do? And I mean, when we share it like that, it just helps us. It really does.
Just for the audience, what's the name of your book?
The name is going to be Bethel Days, as in Daze.
Yeah,
Bethel Days.
I liked that.
It should be out in a month or so, something like that. I'll let everybody know, I guess. But one of the things I point out is, as you were just saying, Joe, you didn't put it in these terms, but everybody has their own journey,
Yeah.
and we have to respect that. I can't say to you, this business of texting your kids, I don't think that's a good idea, because I don't do that. It's your journey,
Mhm.
and same as everybody I mentioned in my book, all the governing body members, everybody, they all have their own journey.
Yeah.
So as Ray Franz once said, that his fellow governing body members were victims of victims. They
Mm.
weren't
Yeah.
all bad guys. They were just
Right.
victims of victims, the same as we were.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so some of them ended up being really scoundrels. Terrible, and they are responsible for the way pedophilia is mishandled and all these different things, because of their dumb
Yeah.
position on
The
things.
witness rule
But
and all.
but I just think it's good to kind of like separate the wheat from the chaff, and realize like what's really going on here, without dwelling on it. Like, I don't encourage, I would say, if anybody is prone to triggers, I would say don't read it. Please don't read my book. Don't pay a nickel for it, because I don't want to be responsible for somebody being hurt.
Right.
But if anybody's, I've had a lot of people say they can't wait to read it. So hopefully they will. But
Here. Yeah.
yeah.
Gary, one of the things that they say that either draws individuals into that organization or that keeps them there is their desire for certainty. In other words, they want to know what's in front of them. They're uncomfortable with uncertainty, and they feel that that's a way that they can get around that by having someone lay out their course for them. What have you found about that?
Yeah, that's that's the way people in general are, but I think especially we are victims of what's called learned helplessness,
Mm.
um, which basically, as JWs, we depended upon the elders to make decisions for us, even if we didn't realize it. That's what we were doing all the time.
Yeah.
And you get comfortable with that. I'll never forget somebody that was actually the wife of the presiding overseer, and if she's still alive, she's well into her 80s, maybe 90s by now. And she said this when she was like 75 or something. She said, why can't they just give us a list of all the movies we're not supposed to watch and all
Oh,
the records we aren't should listen? Why
yeah,
can't they just do
yeah,
that?
yeah,
She wanted
yeah,
them to tell
yeah,
her what to do in all that detail.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we get comfortable with that, and we get uncomfortable with the
yeah,
concept of doing something on our own
right,
without somebody's help. And it's that expression, independent thinking. That's
yeah,
a cultic expression, if I ever
yeah,
heard one.
yeah.
Independent thinking. What the hell is that? All thinking is independent,
We're
for crying out
designed
loud.
to do that. I
Yeah,
know.
if I decide to make a hamburger, did you make that decision for me? I mean,
Yeah,
come on. What these guys
uh,
with their stupid things, independent
uh,
thinking. So, but that's something that we were taught is bad. Independent thinking is bad.
so it's okay for me to do thinking on my own.
I think so.
Okay.
I think so. Am I right? Can I think
Yeah,
that? I guess so.
I'll try. I will try.
Yeah. I used to tell my own kids, I raised them as witnesses, and I wanted them to stay in, and I led them to the elders, and to the whole organization. But I used to tell them, and they're smart. My kids are all smart, and I told them that the reason you have your own brain, you were born with it. We're all created that way. We're all born with our own brains. Nobody can put thoughts into your head that you don't allow into your head. And so nobody can think for you, and you can't think for anyone else. You're the only one that can use your brain, and nobody else can use it.
Yeah.
So, all right, if you have a question and you want to talk to one of the elders, go to the ones you're most comfortable with, maybe your book study, well, when we had the book study, maybe your book study conductor or whatever, but don't just do something because he told you.
Right. Right.
Take what he said and analyze it, and you can ask me about it, or when you get old enough, you probably shouldn't have to ask anybody. But unfortunately, what happens is that they're part of the community that I led them to that says otherwise,
Yeah.
and that's why they don't associate with me today, because they're told not
I,
to. And
you know,
I And I don't know if you're anything like me, but
Gary,
you know,
I'm going to agree exactly with what you said because it's exactly my grief that I led them
yeah,
to that.
yeah,
I led them to
yeah, yeah. And I never. I mean, I look. I was on judicial committees where we disfellowship people, and you hope that everybody in the congregation will respect the arrangement and go along with it and everything. I taught my kids, and I would do that. I had friends that were disfellowshipped, and I didn't ask why. I didn't question, the procedures or the arrangement. I just went along with it, even if I had questions in my mind. So I was guilty of that, but I never, ever, ever in a million years would have said. Well, I'll give you an example of there was a guy that we had to disfellowship. I mean, well, we couldn't do it anything other way. And I remember his daughter, who he was very, very close to, and she was now married, so out of the house. I remember her calling her, and she said, "So could you just tell me, like, can I associate with my dad anymore?"
Hmm.
I said, "This girl, she knows what the magazines say. She knows what the answer to that is." So I said, you know what? Everybody has to make their own decision up with that.
Hmm.
And a lot of people would say, "No, I'm not going to," but it's up to you, you know.
yeah, yeah,
And that's the way I was as an elder. I wouldn't say, "No, if you
Right.
associate with him, we're going to disfellowship you," you know.
yeah.
So that's the way I was with my kids. And so now when I see them not, sending me a message that says only for necessary business,
Hmm.
uh, it's frustrating. Because what's happened with all three of us is that our own kids are not in our control anymore.
Right.
And of course, they're all grown, so they shouldn't be. But but
Right.
but at some point, somebody took over their thinking, it's frustrating as a parent. It's like you have no say in anything, you
Mhm,
know.
mhm,
So
mhm.
that's pretty
See,
maddening.
the scariest thing for some, I know for a youth starts as they start to become aware, they wonder, well, who am I?
Hmm.
Yeah, what am I going to become? What should I become? Um, and sometimes it's easier to let someone define you. In
Hmm.
other words, I'll join this club and they'll tell me everything I need. They'll show me
Hmm.
the requirements. That way I don't have to worry about it. Um, so in other words, they enter into that confinement. They're not free.
Hmm.
They've they've entered into that confinement. So they're really not free to become who they
Hmm.
are. They're just not. They're
Hmm.
not. And that's where on the outside now we are free.
Hmm.
We're
Hmm.
free to
Right.
become who we are, and it's scary. I think for a lot of friends, it's
Hmm.
scary for any of us
Yeah.
because there's so many opportunities, and who knows what it's going to lead to.
Hmm.
But fortunately, we have each other, the examples of each other,
Hmm.
especially when we share each other like this. And I truly appreciate
Yeah.
Yeah,
the
yeah.
fact that you are here. I really do.
I I think of when I first went to junior high school. So I was like, what, 11 or 12 years old. Elementary school goes up to sixth. At least in New York, it was that way. You went
Hmm.
first to sixth, and then seventh and eighth was junior
Yeah,
high school.
Hmm.
yeah,
And for the first time, I didn't just go into the classroom and sit there all day unless the
Right.
teacher
oh,
led
wow,
us to lunch or led us to the music room or whatever. You sit in the same classroom all day for all your subjects.
yeah,
For the first time, I have a locker and I
yeah,
put my books in my locker and I'm responsible for locking it, first of all.
yeah,
And then I have all these classes. I have to be in room number 102
yeah,
for first period, and then Mrs. Smith's class is over here in the other one, and I got to go get my books. And it was like, oh my God, you kind of like I think we all lost our minds at that point. And this is what I've always said to people that I know that are school teachers that say that they teach junior high. I say, you have my deepest sympathies
Yeah.
because all kids lose their minds at that age because they think they either just can't handle the fact that they've got freedom that they don't know what to do with,
right,
or they
right,
go completely berserk with that freedom. They just
yeah,
go nuts.
yeah,
And there's a big difference between like a senior in high school that is looking forward to college next year, but he's got a certain amount of maturity, and
yeah,
somebody that's a new junior high school person, they freak out. And I sometimes think of a post JW as somebody that just entered junior high school.
yeah,
You got all this freedom, and it scares
Hmm.
the crap out of you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Or you start, taking drugs and
Hmm.
promiscuous sex and doing all
yeah,
these things that you think you have a right to do
yeah.
because nobody can tell you what to do, and you abuse your freedom. So
Yeah.
it's like it's a difficult thing. So
Now more.
you
Oh, go
Yeah,
ahead.
you know what I
yeah.
did?
I just did something I wouldn't have normally done just to get disfellowshipped. I wished I would have had enough balls to just turn in a letter and say I'm gone. But instead, I just went off and did something really bad that I'm still really sorry for. But it was just to get out of there, and I probably wouldn't have done that if it wasn't just to get away from all of them.
Yeah.
So in a way, you made your own decision. In a way, you let them make the decision for you. I guess kind of did both, because you knew that they were going to disfellowship you, right?
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah. Well, so that was your journey. That's the way you did it.
It's a process. It's a process. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the fact that you recognize it, that maybe you could have done it differently. You can never take it back. So, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just going to add a point to the gentleman that I wanted to back him up, and it's the only reason why I'm interrupting, is that when Jehovah's Witnesses kick you out and they disfellowship you, you almost feel like, I've talked to a lot of people, like I've been in and out of the organization, and I've talked to a lot of people, and including my wife, and every single one of them thinks that they are dead. So nothing matters. They're going to act out, and we all act out. I had a friend of mine doing cocaine off a stripper's ass. I mean, like, he would never do anything like that. But I'm just saying that people do things because they feel like that they are nothing, and they leave themselves. That's my point. I was chiming into the gentleman.
Yeah, it's almost like a slow suicide in a way.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Gary, come out.
Yes.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Joe.
Yes.
Joe and Fran. This is G, and I'm always amazed when I hear this conversation, how all the things that they're describing about people when they leave. Because in my experience, and I talked to you, Joe, about this, that when I learned the truth about the truth, I was ready to rock and roll. I was 100% ready. I didn't have to go to no stripper. I didn't have to do any drugs. I didn't do anything. I always knew who I was when I was a Jehovah's Witness, and I always knew who I was when I left. And the funny thing about this is that everything that you need was taught to you when you were Jehovah's Witness, because it's very simple. Jesus talked about this, that they killed the prophets and then they were going to kill him. So when I learned the truth about the truth, I thought, oh my God, I am Moses. I am Samson. I am Jesus. I am the apostle. I am all of these people. Because everything that happened to them is going to happen to me. So I didn't look at the Bible from a Bible scholar point of view. I didn't look at the Bible like to tell you what to do with your life. I looked at the Bible and thought, oh my God, what did I just get myself into? And I was ready to rock and roll. So I didn't have to cry. I didn't have to worry. I didn't have to blame anybody. I knew instinctively that in the universe, for some strange reason, God decided I was going to be born in Mexico, transfer to the United States, grow up as an American, and land in a cult. I don't know why. I could have landed in Russia. I could have landed in China, but I landed in Yuma, Arizona. So what I'm saying is, I didn't cry. I didn't complain. I accepted my lot in life, and I went out like a bat out of hell. They said, okay, Gilbert, it's time to go. And I said, okay, when's the next convention? San Diego. I flew an airplane, and I say, I'm Gilbert, and I'm running for governing body. I'm bad. I am like Michael Jackson bad. What I'm trying to tell people is that you have the Watchtower by design has feminized men. And men need to learn to be more aggressive. They need to learn to be more masculine, and they need to learn to be fighters for their families and their friends. and do it in a way that's not physical, but to show that, hey, you can't take this away from me. Mine is mine, and you can have it. And what I'm trying to say also is that every single one of us was taught this. We were taught this. The funny thing about the Jehovah's Witnesses is that everything they taught you was really for your success, but because they threw a lot of junk in there, we focus on the junk. So no matter how hard they try to bastardize the scriptures, you didn't have to go down that path. Does that make any sense what I'm trying to tell you?
Yeah, I hear that. They don't know how to hunt and fish.
Correct.
And, survive. I think they don't have weapons. If the end is coming, I'm not going to hide in a basement and let somebody come and kill me or put me in a concentration camp or something like that. I want to put up a little bit of a fight.
Yeah.
You can't just let you can't just let people come take over your house. And
but what I'm trying to tell you is that when you learn the truth about the truth, and this is my message to you, that you have the advantage. It's kind of like in tennis when you say you have the advantage, the ball's in your court. You already know how this game is played. Jesus told you they're going to kill you. They're going to come after you. They're going to slander you. But now, instead of getting upset, you're like, okay, I got the ball now. The ball's in my court. So I think a lot of people, when they leave the Jehovah's Witness organization, they don't understand that they have the advantage. Mm-hmm. Like in tennis, you have the advantage.
Gilbert, we're graduates.
Remember back in the 60s in Vietnam, at least in this country, there's been other instances from other places in the world. But in this country, it was going to Vietnam in the early 60s. You wouldn't take the draft. You would go to prison. There were lots of Jehovah's Witnesses went to prison.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look up all that old literature, we're not pacifist, or they weren't pacifists. You can take up for yourself. You can defend yourself. You can fight back. Physically. If somebody's coming in your yard and wanting to kill you, you can kill them.
Right.
So it was really odd for a lot of the witnesses to have to do that.
So did you have a question for me or anything or?
So that was a point I was trying to make is that there's no reason to despair when you learn the truth about the truth, because you have the advantage. You were trained for this moment in time. Mm-hmm. What I'm trying to say is you have to not look back. You have to look forward.
Yeah.
And George Washington said, we don't look back unless it is to get something useful, to derive something useful. We don't look back to cry. We look back to learn so we can take it to the next level. And I think a lot of Jehovah's don't understand that they have power.
I think what young ones didn't have though is the real life role models. Now maybe a son had a father that was that way. Maybe a son didn't have a father, and in the congregation, we may not have had that kind of model. We had the Bible. We had the Bible examples, but maybe that was just a fantasy for us. Maybe that wasn't a real life role model. And sometimes real life role models are what we need.
Yeah.
And I think we have the benefit of them now more than ever, just with the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing about the way Bible role models will be used is that it was always used in a way to fit the agenda.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite example is the example of Hannah, and I don't remember it now, but I remember after I was kind of on my way out, reading that account in, what is it, First Samuel or whatever the heck it is.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, the way that they've always explained that is so wrong. She didn't really have a great attitude when she was like complaining to God and blaming him for everything. And I'm just, so it's like everything that they said about be like Hannah. Well, yeah, if I'm going to be like Hannah, I'm going to be like telling God, what'd you do this for? And okay, maybe it is okay to be like Hannah, but they would everything that they took was to fit their agenda, whether
Right.
it's the example of David or Jesus or whomever.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to take it with a grain of salt, and it's your own journey. Don't worry about being like David or whoever.
I think from what's happening right now,
it's about her infertility, and I'm not sure, but if you read it closely, it could be that priest was the father of Samuel, and that's why they took him back to live there. Read
Who
it,
knows?
people.
it's
Yeah.
creative.
This is what you're wrong and I'm right, because when I went to Warwick, I was Moses and I was saying, let my people go. I was Martin.
I like it.
No, listen. I was Martin Luther King. I was George Washington. I was all of the great people. I was like Benito Juarez, who my dad taught me about the president of Mexico. So I was everything, not only in the Bible, but in the history that my parents taught me. And so what I'm trying to tell you is that these stories are not for other people to dictate to you. You're supposed to read these stories and you're supposed to say, I am these people. I have the power to be just as strong as Solomon.
I like it.
I have the power
I like
to be
it.
just as wise. And so don't let other people tell you what these stories mean. You're smart enough to know what these stories mean. You're smart enough to say, I can be like Martin Luther King.
When I left years ago in my 20s, I was at college in an empty apartment, and I mean empty. I didn't even have a typewriter and a bed yet. So I'm on this hardwood floor with a Bible. I don't even think I had the Bible. I think it was from memory. And I said, well, Solomon asked for wisdom, so I'm going to ask for wisdom. And people later joked with me and said, well, you should have asked for money. Well, if you have wisdom, you can get money.
What happened to Solomon? I don't think God answered his prayer.
God answered mine. I've done real well, thanks.
Can I ask Gary some questions, please?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
Okay. Gary?
Yes.
Yeah, you said you were at Bethel. Were you in Brooklyn?
Yeah.
Okay. I was there mid to late 80s. Did we overlap maybe?
I was gone when you say late 80s, you mean like what, 88, 89, something like that?
Yeah.
Because I was gone by then. I was gone. I guess mid 80s is when I left. So I overlapped with Barbara Anderson maybe a year or two. I remember Barbara and Joe. I remember their sons. I knew their sons better than I knew them actually. But yeah.
I do. Let me ask you this. You earlier mentioned sitting at governing body tables,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember that I was at one too. That tended to be during a Gilead class.
Right.
Designated governing body table, and
right.
every week there would be a new governing body member at the foot of the table.
Right.
Gilead couple. I want to ask you.
Mm-hmm.
You ever sit at the table with Brother Schroeder and his wife?
Yep.
Charlotte?
Yeah, all of them. Yeah.
What did you think about Charlotte?
I don't really remember anything about her. Because sometimes some of the wives had a lot to say, and others just didn't talk at all. I don't remember anything about her. I knew their son Judah really well. We were friends actually, but no, I don't remember Charlotte. I mean, I remember who she is. I remember meeting her and everything, but it's funny. Some of the wives, like Sydney Barber. I mean, I talked to her on the phone when he visited because she had directions for me, and Edith Suter I used to talk to all the time, whether Grant was there or not. Some of them I knew really well, but others, like I don't remember anything about Marina Sidlick. I just don't remember anything about her, except that she was really attractive. But so anyway, no, I don't remember anything about Charlotte.
Okay. She kind of had a snarl. I felt like she was not my favorite person. Generally, they were nice people. And I thought Sister Barry was extremely nice.
Melba?
They were an extremely nice couple.
Yeah, they were nice. I'll tell you honestly, one of my favorite people to this day that I have ever met is Jack Barr. I just love that man, and his wife Mildred was a lovely person too. And everybody that I know that was at Bethel says the same thing. Barbara Anderson will say the same thing. A lovely, lovely man. Couldn't find anything negative to say about him. So I report that in my book. I say, look, there's nothing bad to say about this guy, so why should I make up a story, So, yeah, but the Barrys were nice. I mean, Lloyd Barry actually was a very, there were some governing body members that really, I don't think they did much. They didn't have much power. Lloyd Barry was one of the very powerful ones, and he's one of the ones I was talking about when they went through that struggle with the service versus the writing department, and how to handle pedophilia and all these different things. Lloyd Barry was on one side of that, and he had a lot of power. So yeah, it's pretty interesting.
I did say Brother Barry when I really meant to say Brother Barr. They were extremely nice.
Yeah.
Barry.
Yeah.
And what I remember about Brother Barry is whenever he commented, it seemed like he brought in something about the Japanese brothers and sisters.
Yeah.
Because let's see where he did his missionary work in Japan, and they had that special thing. Brother Schroeder always talked about the African brothers and sisters because he must have been there.
Yeah.
So
no, but that's true about Barry. He was in Japan. Of course, he's from New Zealand, but yeah, he's always talking about that.
Yeah, no matter what, he found a way to say, and in Japan, this would happen. He always really praised them. I felt the same way you felt about Brother Sidlick. The one brother I did not like, I think, is the brother you mentioned, Brother Barber. Brother Barber always mentioned the apostates, and he said that the apostates, they don't want to be in the organization and they don't want to be outside of the organization, so they always stay around the edges of the organization, and they're always they always have destructive criticism, nothing constructive to say. He was my least favorite person of the governing body.
He was. Go ahead.
And I also, there was something you said about, I don't know if you said creature worship or something like that. I felt like that would happen a lot when it came to Fred Franz, and when visitors were there, brothers and sisters from wherever. Fred Franz, it just seemed like anything he said, it was like coming from God. Everything he said or did, they were like, it was like creature worship. And I used to say it to some of my associates at Bethel. How did you find people who came to visit Bethel? What did you feel about how they treated the governing body?
There probably was a certain amount of, I mean, like what you said about Franz, I've always found to be true, because he's the oldest. I mean, he actually met C.T. Russell. He was the Bible scholar. He's the guy that knew Greek and Hebrew, and he's the one that wrote all those books for Rutherford that Rutherford took credit for, and he wrote all of Rutherford's speeches, and And back before all the GB were celebrities like they are now with this stupid jw.org website, none of them were. Nobody knew any of those guys. You know, nobody would say if you said Jarrah's, nobody would know what that meant, except that they knew Franz from some district convention like at Yankee Stadium or something. So he was the celebrity. I'll give you that. He was the celebrity. And so, yeah, people tended to be like, "Oh, wow, that's brother." In fact, I'll tell you, I write about this in my book. There was somehow this rumor started back in my congregation that I had left that that I was working with Brother Franz, like in his office, and I'm like, "No, I'm not working with him at all. I barely know the guy." But but that's the way people are. They're just like, "Oh, have you met Brother Franz yet? Have you met Brother Franz yet?" So, but I never bought into it.
I remember a Watchtower around 94, 95, where I don't remember this before that, where they printed a picture of the governing body. But at least this time I thought to myself, who in the world are these guys? They look crazy. And I went up to the Watchtower conductor and some of the elders after the meeting and said, who are these guys?
Mm-hmm.
They just look nutty.
Yeah.
Did you hear stories? Did you were there at Bethel? You came after Ray Franz was gone?
Just after, yeah.
Just after? Were there stories circulating around about Ray Franz and that time that he was in just before you came?
What my memory is that we already had that announcement in one of the Kingdom Ministries about the apostates that had to be disfellowshipped, and he was not among them at that point. He was still okay, and so they would talk a lot about the apostates in general. That was, I mean, they talked about that incessantly about how evil they were. They didn't really care. Nobody had any fond memories. Like I lost a friend. They just were glad to be rid of them. Just totally dehumanized the whole thing. But Franz was not part of that because he wasn't disassociated yet. I'm not sure when that changed, but I do remember reading the Time magazine article that came out in, I guess, January or February of '82, I think it was, where he was, they printed some of his thoughts about 1975, and by then, I don't know, they probably had made the announcement by then. And once that announcement was made, then it's open season, and people would say whatever the heck they felt like saying about him. It didn't matter. They would just say the worst things about him, like everything he ever did was horrible, and you know how that is. I mean, even in our own congregations, as soon as somebody's disfellowshipped for whatever, there's always like, well, I always wondered why he did this when he was out in the ministry, and like they just have all these question marks in their head about this evil person all of a sudden. But the thing is that it was okay; they could do that. Nobody ever said like, stop talking about Ray Franz. Because now we know he's an apostate, so he is Judas personified. So you can say whatever you want, and that was that. And you mentioned Kerry Barber. In my conversation with him, I tried to focus it on reality, like what did he actually say, what did he actually do, and he enlightened me a lot about a couple of things, but for the most part, he's just like, yeah, he talked a lot. He liked to hear himself talk, So.
I think about Jesus. You know what I think about Jesus? Nobody even believed him when he was here. The apostles didn't. They were in God's presence, and they didn't understand what he's talking about. And then they write this stupid Bible that everybody's getting hung up over little details, what word is in what place. It's just ridiculous.
It's all people had. The printing press changed the world before the.
Well, yeah, and Jehovah's Witnesses, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society was part of that. I mean, they're one of the biggest printing companies in the whole world.
Yes, they were.
Yeah, so what are they going to do now? They can't. People don't buy books anymore. People don't buy books and magazines door to door anymore.
They got moved.
You know, they don't have anything. They don't have. They're going to have to think up some new stuff.
Oh,
I was going to ask.
they won't get my money for it though.
I was going to ask Gary about something that happened. It was probably in the mid '80s. Can I do that? Is that okay?
Yes, if you want, sure.
Oh, okay. There was a time in the mid '80s when, and this has to do with Ray France, but not directly. But there was a graduating class from Gilead, and 6 couples were assigned to the Zaire branch in Africa. And they explained that they were opening up a new branch. And sometime around that time, either before or after, all the governing body members, just about everybody, they were flying over to Africa to open up the branch. And the only person who stayed back was Brother Genghis, because I heard he was afraid of flying. But Fred France was the head of the table. And there was a woman sitting there with him.
Oh, Zach, you're going around and around in circles. Everybody knows all this stuff.
I was listening. I want to hear what Zach has to say about Africa. I'm interested.
Hey, Gary, if I can cut in now, Gary.
Yeah.
How's your schedule?
Gary, so
well, it's after 4 a.m. here. So
yeah, we don't want to drag you out here.
No.
Yeah.
You've done wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I truly appreciate what you've related.
Waiting to hear about Africa.
I was going to know what's in Africa.
If we can just if we can give a little time for Gary. Gary, just any closing words? Just to.
Sorry.
Well, I guess just like I said, I'm talking about this book and everything, and I don't want people to think that it's super important to worry about exactly what the governing body member said about this and what he said about that. But I just think it's good to understand that they're human beings, that you know, they were victims of victims, like Ray France said. But more importantly, I think it's just good to move on. If that would be my main message is well, everybody's got their own journey, but at some point, the less that organization means to us, the healthier we're going to be, and the more we can move on and make something of our life, and we don't have to define ourselves as it ruined my life, I'm a victim. You know, it's like, okay, that happened. I mean, you look at people like Nelson Mandela, spent most of his life in jail.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that finally let him out became his political opponents, and he didn't hold bitterness. He just said, okay, you know, he learned from it, and then he became president of the country. Well, that's an extraordinary example. That's Nelson Mandela. We're not all Nelson Mandelas, you know, but I think we can kind of do the same thing in as much as we can say, okay, that's what I did years ago. I'm done. I learned from it. I'm grateful for this. I'm not so grateful for that, but here I am. What am I going to do with myself now? And just not worried. And when I say forget about an organization or whatever, I don't mean you could literally forget, because our memories, we don't forget emotions. We don't forget the way this, you know, they come up in us at times and we're not even aware of what's happening. Something triggers us. So we don't actually forget everything unless we have an actual damage to our brain. So I'm not saying like, oh, forget this and forget that, but just in terms of it not being important anymore. And, you know, at some point, hopefully we can laugh about some of this stuff, like I do with the thing with, like I had this bad experience one day with Dan Sidlick, and I was actually reading it the other day, and it just struck me like how ridiculous it was. You know, like, does it even matter? I was 23 years old at the time. Who cares? You know. So that's my message. It's just to, you know, move past it, and just don't let it define your life. In other words, like what you guys are doing with this channel.
What's your last
Obviously, there's a certain amount of interest in because you're talking about the organization and you're helping people that are escaping, and everybody's got their own point in progress that they're at. They might be right just out, and you don't want to just tell them like, stop talking about that organization. Obviously they're going to talk about it a lot because they just left, so like I said, it doesn't mean like, telling people what to think, what not to think, but just at some point, we need to like not let that organization control us anymore. And if we're thinking about it and thinking ourselves as in terms of being victims because they did this to me, they said that to me, and there are people that have major grievances, people that were like sexually abused as children, and the elders mishandled it or whatever.
Absolutely.
You can't ask those people to just forget it. So I'm not, but at some point we need to just not let that organization control our thinking in any way.
It's so well said, Gary. You know what I'm gonna take away, Gary? What I'm gonna take away is that we all need to do something extraordinary.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna take that away from
Yep.
Gary, we had a woman in there asking
Thank you,
about the book. Tell the person where they can get your book.
Oh, well, it's not available yet, but I will keep you posted. What I'm going to probably do is I'm going to probably create a Facebook page for it. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow when I wake up, if I wake up tomorrow. But I'm probably going to create a Facebook page, which I'll probably call Bethel Daze, DAZE, or something like that. It should be available. I'm just waiting for a few more people to read it so I can get their comments to include on the back cover. Really, otherwise I'm ready to go. So there you have it, and it'll be available in printed form as well as an ebook.
Nice.
We're gonna be reading what you gave us,
Yes.
Gary, and then we'll be
Okay.
watching the book. And
Thanks.
thank you so much
Yes,
for
thank you.
staying up.
Yes.
Thank you.
What is it?
Oh, you're welcome.
What is
Oh,
it?
and there is one other thing that I did want to say that I was thinking like a half hour ago, and that is, what I talked about life coach. I mean, it is a business. That's what I do for a living, but most of the conversations I have with people, like if you call me up, I'm going to talk to you. I go to these XJW groups in London all the time, and we're just having a great time together. So it's I don't enter a client relationship with the vast majority of people I talk to. So anybody wants to give me a call or something like that, or reach out to me, that's great.
You're still human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're so glad that we
Yeah,
reconnected with you,
Very
Gary.
much. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
me too.
Yeah. We'll stay in touch.
Yeah, I hope you get some
Okay.
now.
Yeah. Love you, Gary.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for what you're doing, and thanks for having me part of it.
We have one more woman. We got about 2 minutes left. Go ahead, Miss.
Oh,
Go
okay,
ahead.
sure.
What do you want to say to Gary? Go ahead. You're on with us.
I'm a post Jehovah's Witness, and the biggest problem I have is trust. Trust is so violated so many ways throughout my whole life, and now it's just I'm so lost in that department.
Yeah, that's a common problem, and it's not just XJWs. I mean, it's common with most people because most people have been burned by somebody. I always try to think that like there's nothing wrong with love. Love never fails. I mean, I know it's a scripture in the Bible, but it's true. It's just that people don't love properly, or they lose it, or whatever. So it doesn't mean to give up on the concept of trusting people, or being loved by somebody or loving somebody. I think hopefully the lesson we can learn from things that have caused that lack of trust is what to look for in like is this a situation where I got to back off and well, it's really common to talk about boundaries. For example, like we have to set personal boundaries where and boundaries are not designed to control somebody else's behavior. It's just to let that person know that if this is what you do, this is not something I'm going to accept. So we're not going to penalize you for it, but I just want you to know that it's not something that I'm going to take seriously or what have you. So one of our boundaries might have to do with whatever it is that we've learned from a person that we learned to not trust. You know, we don't want to experience that again. So the next person that comes along, you know, I mean, I got into a relationship with somebody that was like a narcissist. And I had never been in a relationship like that before, even all the time I was a Jehovah's Witness. So I had no idea how to look for it, like what signs to look for. It just happened. And I was like, holy mackerel, this was like horrendous, you know? So things like that'll happen every so often, but hopefully we learn each time that this is what to look for, and don't condemn the person you haven't met yet,
Hey man,
and assume that you can't trust them either, you know?
I'm a little bit behind you there, and I think love fails all the time.
So love didn't work? Or it was the person that didn't love right?
It doesn't work, man. Everybody that loves somebody gets killed. Everybody who tries to make peace gets killed. Violence is what solves all. You know, when I was a Jehovah's Witness, you know what I used to hear? Jehovah solves all his problems with violence. Lots of bloodshed. That's who Jehovah is.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you won't spend the rest of your life in that mindset. I hope not.
Yeah, we can always shift our gaze.
I'm not a violent person.
No, I'm not saying you are, but it sounds like you're very discouraged.
It's Jehovah. Jehovah's a violent God.
Okay, so why does it matter?
Does it matter? Do you want to be on Jehovah's side or love and peace?
I mean, do you believe that? Do you believe in a God that's violent like that?
I don't call him God, but I think there's a violent entity out there in the world trying to destroy all of us. And he's using the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society to do it.
Yeah. I have to go to bed now. Actually, it's 4:30 in the morning here. But I would just say to be a good person and contribute to a world that's not like that.
That's right.
Yeah, let's let Gary go to bed here, folks. I mean, Gary, you've been up so long. We really appreciate you coming on tonight. And
okay,
you made a real difference here. So we'll cut you loose now. We have a lot of people who still want to talk, but you go to bed. You just go to bed and relax. We'll get you back here again, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Thanks again, Gary.
Okay.
Thank
you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Love you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Gary.
All right. Well, we appreciate it. My goodness, that's Gary Alt. He's a former Jehovah's Witness, and Fran and Joe have been interviewing him tonight. Well, friends, we are not done now. We have got a brand new program coming up here tonight. My goodness, you don't want to leave us now. We have got a man coming in from Tennessee, and he's got a brand new program here on the Watchtower, even here on our 6 screens about the Watchtower, I should say. And it's called Red Pilled from the Watchtower. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to get Eric coming in from Tennessee here very shortly. So stay with us. I don't think you're really going to enjoy anything if you don't listen in tonight. I think you'll really like what's being said by Eric. He'll be coming on next. So we're going to end this broadcast. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Fran. Thank you, Gary Alt, out there in the United Kingdom. Really, we appreciate everything that's going on tonight. Excellent broadcast. Thank you, guys. Stay with us. We'll be coming on YouTube in just about 2 minutes. Thank you very much.